Hi everyone. So today we will talk about steps in research processes. It's very important as research is a systematic approach. So, research processes consist of series of actions and steps needed for conducting scientific research. If the researcher follows certain steps in conducting the research, the work can be carried out smoothly with least difficulty. These steps are: Step 1. Identification of the problem. The first and the most important step for identifying a problem is asking a question or identifying a need that arises as a result of curiosity and to which it becomes necessary to find an answer. The psychological studies are focused on one or many of the following kinds of questions. What are the events that cause or determine a given behavior or response? What is the nature of behavior or action, that is, its structure and how it is linked with other actions and behavior? What are the relationships of internal psychological processes with behavioral phenomena? The research question determines the direction of the study, and researchers have to struggle a lot in identifying and articulating the same. Essentially, two steps are involved in formulating the research problem, viz., understanding the problem thoroughly and rephrasing the same into meaningful terms. The main focus of formulating a research problem is to decide what you want to find about. It is extremely important to evaluate the research problem in the light of funds, time, and expertise and knowledge available at your disposal. It is equally important to identify any gaps in your knowledge of relevant discipline, such as statistics required for analysis. Once the question has been asked, that next step is to identify the factors that have to be examined to answer the question. Such factors might range from the most simple, such as child's age or socioeconomic status, to more complicated measures such as the effects of violent cartoons on child's behavior. The factors may be age of the child, degree of violence it programs, emotional arousal, facial expressions, family communication patterns, etc. Besides this, following factors should be considered by the researcher for identifying a research problem. Have not been investigated before, will contribute to the understanding of your question, are available to investigate, lead to another question. For identifying a good solvable problem, the investigator. A body of prior work related to research problem is referred to as literature. Scientific research includes a review of the relevant literature. When a researcher reviews the previous researches in related fields, he becomes familiar of the literature and is that it is helpful or to eliminate duplication of what has already been done and provide guidance and suggestions for further research. The main purpose of review of literature is fourfold. First, it gives an idea about the variables which have been found to be conceptually and practically important and unimportant in the related field. Thus, the review of literature helps in discovering and selecting variables relevant for the given study. Second, the review of the literature provides as estimate of the previous work and provides an opportunity for the meaningful extension of the previous work. Third, a review of the literature helps the researcher in systematizing and expanding and growing body of knowledge. This facilitates in drawing useful conclusions regarding the variables under study and provide a meaningful way of their subsequent applications. Fourth, a review of the literature also helps in redefining the variable and determining the meanings and the relationship among them so that the researcher can build up a case as well as a context for further investigation that has merit and applicability. There are different sources of review of the literature such as journals, books, abstracts, indexes, and periodicals. If you are not sure what journal and other resources to examine for research idea, you should know that the computer search engine PsycInfo is a very effective tool for getting and going through the technical literature. The print companion to PsycInfo is Psychological Abstract, and Both of these contain abstracts of articles from almost all journals that publish psychological research. If you find an abstract of interest, you can then read the entire article for additional information. Let's move on to step 2, formulating a hypothesis. Earlier we talked about identification of the problem. Now we are talking about formulating a hypothesis. When the researcher has identified the problem and reviewed the relevant literature, he or she formulates a hypothesis, which is a kind of suggested answer to the problem. Hypothesis plays the key role in formulating and guiding any study. The hypotheses are generally derived from earlier research findings, existing theories, and personal observations and experiences. From a careful examination of relevant theory and previous findings, the psychologist would be able to state one or more proposition whose validity could be tested. Ideally, these hypotheses would be based on deductive theory, but they may simply be new hypotheses or hypotheses based on previous research findings. Hypothesis may be defined as a tentative statement showing a relationship between variables under study. It's stated in the form of declarative sentence. For instance, suppose you are interested to know the effect of reward on learning. You have analyzed the past researchers had found the indication that the two variables are positively related. You need to convert this idea in terms of testable statement. At this point, you may develop the following hypothesis. Those who are rewarded shall require lesser number of trials to learn the lesson than those who are not rewarded. For unbiased research, the researcher must formulate a hypothesis in advance of the data gathering process. No hypothesis should be formulated after the data are collected. Step 3. Identifying, manipulating, and controlling variables. While talking about the hypothesis, you will encounter this word, variable, in the scientific literature, in the psychology. Variables are defined as those characteristics which are manipulated, controlled, and observed by the experimenter. At last, 3 types of variable must be recognized at the outset and dependent variable. The independent variable and the extraneous variable. So, 3 types of variables are dependent variable, independent variable, and the extraneous variable. The dependent variable is one about which the prediction is made on the basis of the experiment. In the other word, the dependent variable is the characteristics or condition that changes as the experimenter changes the independent variables. The independent variable is that condition or characteristics which is manipulated or selected by the experimenter in order to find out its relation to the some observed phenomena. Extraneous variable is the uncontrolled variable that may affect the dependent variable. The experimenter is not interested in the changes produced due to the extraneous variable, and hence he tries to control it as far as practicable. The extraneous variable is known as the relevant variable. In order to make a variable clear, precise, and easy to communicate, it is important that it is operationally defined. An operational definition involves specifying the actual operation that defines a given variable. Operational definition is also important for the purpose of measurement, since psychological variables are complex and their measurement poses special problems. Therefore, psychologists are very eager to use operational definitions. They frequently use variable measures, behavioral measures, and psychological measures of variable in their studies, which are able to help him or her to specify the operations and may allow quantification. Step 4. Formulating a research design. A research design may be regarded as the blueprint of those procedures which are adapted by the researcher for testing and relationship between the dependent variable and the independent variable. There are several kinds of experimental design that are selection of any one is based upon the purpose of the research, types of variables to be controlled and manipulated, as well as upon the conditions under which the experiment is to be conducted. The main purpose of experimental design is to help the researcher in manipulating the independent variables freely and to provide maximum control of the extraneous variable so that it may be said with all certainty that the experimental change is due to only the manipulation of the experimental variable. The main function of research design is to explain how you will find answers to your research question. The research design sets out the logic of your inquiry. Our research design should include the following logistical arguments. How to made according to the proposed research design. The measurement procedure, the sampling strategy, the frame of analysis and the time frame. For any investigation, the selection of any appropriate research design is crucial in enabling you to arrive at valid finding, comparisons and conclusions. A faulty design may derive misleading findings. Empirical investigation is primarily evaluated in the light of the research design adopted. While selecting a research design, it is important to ensure it is valid, workable and meaningful and manageable. Constructing device for observation and measurement. When the research design has been formulated, the next step is to construct or choose appropriate tools of research for scientific observation and measurement. Questionnaire and interview schedules are the most common tools which have been developed for the psychological research. If the ready-made tools are not available, then a researcher may have developed appropriate tools before undertaking the study. All these tools of research are ways through which data are collected by asking for information from person rather than observing them. Sample selection and data collection. After deciding the tools for the study, the researcher also decides about the participants of the study. Usually a small sample is drawn which represents the population. The participants could be children, adolescents, college students, teachers, managers, clinical patients, or any group of the individuals in whom where the phenomena under investigation is prevalent. Depending on the nature of the research problem, a researcher may choose particular method, example, observation, experiment, case study, and survey for data collection. The researcher also decides how the tools to be administered to collect data, that is individual or group. In data collection phase, researcher must consider recruitment of staff and assignment to them, way of increasing response rate and cost of training of staff, etc. Effect of each of these must be evaluated in terms of cost, accuracy, reliability and validity. Step 5. Data analysis and their interpretation. After making observation and data collected are analyzed with the careful various quantitative, statistical and qualitative technique, careful scrutiny of the data is crucial aspect of scientific method. Careful scrutiny of the data is critical aspect of scientific method. The purpose of the analysis is to make sense of the data, see what light they throw on the problem and the hypothesis of the study, and draw conclusion accordingly. Data analysis can be done by using univariate analysis, in which research deals with a single characteristic of interest, bivariate analysis, in which research deals with the two characteristics of the interest, and by using multivariate analysis, in which more than two characteristics are involved. Depending upon the nature of the data and purpose of the experiment, either a parametric statistic or a non-parametric statistic is chosen for statistical analysis. In general, the purpose of carrying out the statistical analysis is to reject the null hypothesis and that the alternative hypothesis may be accepted. Step 6. Drawing conclusion. The investigator, after analyzing the result, draws some conclusion. In fact, the investigator wants to make some statement about the research problem which he could not take without conducting his research. Whatever conclusion drawn, researcher generalizes it to the whole population. During this phase, hypotheses are accepted or rejected. At the same time, the conclusions of the study are related to the theory or research finding from which our hypothesis originally coming. Depending on few new findings, the original theory may have to be modified. Step 7. Preparation of report and publication. This is the last step in most of the research studies. The researcher documents all the steps of his or her research in clear terms. This report informs that what you have done, what you have discovered, and what conclusion you have drawn from findings. If you are clear about the whole process, you will also be clear about way you want to write in your report. This helps the reader to understand the study and use it for various purposes. It allows one to replicate the study. The publication of study in scientific journals or books and in public domain makes the work available for wider dissemination.